President Biden's Attorney General was in rare form this morning when he went on the attack during a House hearing. Tired of weeks of attacks from Republicans against the Justice Department that he leads, Merrick Garland decided to address every ridiculous talking point the GOP has been engaging in. And that led to an explosive exchange with Representative Matt Gaetz, in which Merrick Garland called him a liar. That doesn't happen every day. You don't want to miss this. I'll break it all down for you. In the last episode of House Republicans versus Merrick Garland, the Republicans decided to hold Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress for refusing to release the audio recordings of President Biden's interview with Special Counsel Robert Hur. Robert Hur interviewed Joe Biden during his investigation into classified documents found in his office and home. In a rare move, the Department of Justice released the full transcripts of those interviews, something they usually don't do. But Republicans decided they needed to create a problem out of thin air, so they demanded the audio recordings of these interviews. I'm sure they were hoping to edit the recordings to make Joe Biden look bad. But releasing audio recordings of DOJ interviews is a terrible idea because it could deter witnesses from participating in future investigations. Merrick Garland decided enough was enough and wasted no time in shooting down this ridiculous charge.
We have gone beyond precedent to provide the committee with the transcripts of the special counsel's interview with the president. But we have made clear that we will not provide audio recordings from which the transcripts that you already have were created. Releasing the audio would chill cooperation with the department in future investigations, and it could influence witnesses' answers if they thought the audio of their law enforcement interviews would be broadcast to Congress and the public. Now, in response, certain members of this committee and the Oversight Committee are seeking contempt as a means of obtaining, for no legitimate purpose, sensitive law enforcement information that could harm the integrity of future investigations.
No legitimate purpose. Those are fighting words from Merrick Garland. And he's 100% right. Republicans have not provided a valid reason for why they need the audio recordings. They have the full transcript that they can read. With absolutely no proof, some Republicans claim that the transcripts don't match the recordings in a deliberate attempt to deceive the public. That outrageous charge is exactly why Merrick Garland is on the attack. And Merrick's next preemptive attack was a big one, pushing back on the conspiracy theory that President Biden's Department of Justice is behind the state charges in New York that Donald Trump was convicted on.
This effort is only the most recent in a long line of attacks on the Justice Department's work. It comes alongside threats to defund particular department investigations, most recently the special counsel's prosecution of the former president. It comes alongside false claims that a jury verdict in a state trial brought by a local district attorney was somehow controlled by the Justice Department. That conspiracy theory is an attack on the judicial process itself.
False claims and conspiracy theories. That is some charged language from our Attorney General, and I like it. Even before Donald Trump was found guilty of 34 felonies in New York State, Republicans have been trying to convince the public that it's really Biden's Justice Department behind the case. The GOP have been hyperventilating about one of the prosecutors on the case, Matthew Colangelo, claiming he left the Department of Justice to join the Manhattan DA's team just to prosecute Trump. We know this is nonsense because people leave the DOJ all the time to take other jobs. After taking apart the GOP's talking points before they can even get them out, Merrick Garland issued a warning to everyone listening.
I will not be intimidated, and the Justice Department will not be intimidated. We will continue to do our jobs free from political influence, and we will not back down from defending democracy.
But Merrick Garland's warning did little to deter Matt Gaetz from proceeding with his pre-planned script meant to impress an audience of MAGA dopes and Donald Trump. Matt Gaetz began by creating a new problem to complain about, demanding all correspondence between the Justice Department and local prosecutors like Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg. Matt Gaetz knows this is a ridiculous request that would have to go through the proper channels to get approved. But in the meantime, he can use it as a talking point to claim the DOJ is trying to hide something.
Will the Department of Justice provide to the committee all documents, all correspondence between the department and Alvin Bragg's office and Fani Willis's office and Letitia James's office?
The offices you're referring to are independent offices of state.
I get that. I get that. The question is whether or not you will provide all of your documents and correspondence. That's the question. I don't need a history lesson.
Well, I'm going to say again, we do not control those offices. They make their own decisions.
The question is whether you communicate with them, not whether you control them. Do you communicate with them, and will you provide those communications?
If you make a request, we'll refer it to our Office of Legislative Affairs.
But see, here's the thing. You come in here and you lodge this attack that it's a conspiracy theory that there is coordinated lawfare against Trump. And then when we say, fine, just give us the documents, give us the correspondence, and then if it's a conspiracy theory, that will be evident. But when you say, well, we'll take your request, and then we'll sort of work it through the DOJ's accommodation process, then you're actually advancing the very dangerous conspiracy theory that you're concerned about.
Next up for Mr. Gaetz is to try to attack the judge from Trump's New York case by getting Merrick Garland to criticize him. But Merrick wasn't taking Matt Gaetz's bait.
Now, you were a judge, once nominated the highest court in our country. When you were a judge, I'm just curious, did you ever make political donations to partisan candidates?
No.
No, and you didn't because that would create the potential appearance of impropriety.
I didn't because there's a federal rule barring federal judges from making contributions.
Right, but under that same theory of attacks on the judicial process, like, shouldn't someone be owed like a jury of their peers and a judge that's non-biased rather than getting a judge from your political opponent's donor file?
Well, I'm well aware that you're not asking a hypothetical. You're asking me to comment on a jury verdict in another jurisdiction which has to be respected. I won't comment on it. That case is still ongoing.
Republicans have been hyperventilating about Judge Juan Merchan donating $15 to Biden's campaign in 2020. They think this makes Judge Merchan biased against Donald Trump. But this ignores everything the judge did during the trial, which included quite a bit of special treatment for the criminal defendant. And an even more ridiculous accusation by Republicans is that the judge is biased because his adult daughter makes a living in politics.
And so let me ask you this question about your time as a judge. Was there ever a time when you were a judge when you had a family member who was personally profiting off of the notoriety of a case that was before your court?
Look, I'm going to say again, it's very clear you're asking me to comment on a case in another jurisdiction.
No, wait, hold on, Mr. Attorney General. Did you ever have a family member profit off of the notoriety of any case that you sat over?
I'm going to say again, you're asking
yes or no?
You're asking me to comment on a case currently.
Well, it seems you're connecting the dots, Mr. Attorney General. I'm just asking you as to a general principle, but you are aware that Judge Merchan's daughter was profiting off of this prosecution. You are aware that that creates the appearance of impropriety. You know the very reason there's a federal rule against judges giving donations is because it is the very attack on the judicial process that we're concerned about.
I'm sorry, I don't agree with anything you just said, but
what a performance! Too bad there is no substance to any of it. And that all led to this big moment where Merrick Garland finally had enough of Matt Gaetz's nonsense and called him a liar right to his face.
I'm not going to comment on it.
Okay, so you won't comment on it, Mr. Attorney General, but you had no problem dispatching Matthew Colangelo. Who's Matthew Colangelo?
That is false. I did not dispatch Matthew Colangelo.
Matthew Colangelo became the Assistant Attorney General at the very beginning of the Biden administration. Without having been Senate confirmed, goes and gets this senior role at the DOJ, and then after, I believe it's Gupta replaces Colangelo, Colangelo makes this remarkable downstream career journey from the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., and then pops up in Alvin Bragg's office to go get Trump. And you're saying that's just a career choice that was made that has nothing to do with the lawfare coordinated by the DOJ.
I'm saying it's false. I did not dispatch Mr. Colangelo anywhere.
It's great to see Merrick Garland forcefully pushing back on these clowns. Republicans have been getting away with murder with their attacks on our Justice Department. These attacks on the rule of law are undermining public trust in these important institutions and make the jobs of our law enforcement community more difficult. Enough is enough. And finally, I wanted to show this brief moment that happened moments after Matt Gaetz finished getting his tongue lashing from the Attorney General. Democratic lawmaker Steve Cohen from Tennessee decided to remind the public about who Matt Gaetz really is in this wonderful moment.
I noticed Mr. Gaetz, who took you on first, is not here now. And that's unfortunate because he is living testament to the fact and direct evidence that you have not weaponized the Justice Department. He was investigated for sex trafficking, and while many expected a prosecution, you chose not to prosecute this very active Republican. Is that true? You did not prosecute him?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what is in the public record and what's not, so I'm just not going to comment on that.
Donald Trump's conviction last week helped restore public faith in the rule of law, but we have a long way to go. I'm glad we have people like Merrick Garland in these important positions during these turbulent times. Big props to Attorney General Garland for calling out the liars and conspiracy theorists right to their faces.